I've been tinkering with the Nismo a little bit more than normally lately, so thought I'd go off my way to capture some of it, put a short video together and show you exactly what I've been up to. So, while the odd bits featured here wouldn't really be worth filming or making much mention of by themselves, thought if I bunched them together in a video along with a healthy dose of my strangely much loved word-for-word narration, it could still make for an entertaining watch, as if you're into cleaning cars, you're probably also into faffing about with them in other respects too. Speaking of entertaining things, I've agreed to give Raid Shadow Legends, one of the most complex and in-depth mobile games around, another plug, as much like getting stuck into your car, getting stuck into this can be pretty enjoyable too. To start with, there's hundreds of different champions to summon and collect, ranging from the demonic to the downright raunchy, all of which boast unique skill sets designed to bolster your battle clan. Add to that the millions of artefacts to uncover and equip throughout the game and you have yourself an almost endless dose of digital strategy. It's the graphical attention to detail that impresses me the most though, as whether summoning a new champion or battling a dungeon boss, you get the sense you're doing more than just playing a mobile game. A recent update has tweaked and improved some of the champions even further, plus you now have the ability to craft your own distinctive artefacts in the Forge. So sign up as a new player via the links below today and receive 100,000 silver and free blood-soaked Death Chanted champion direct to your inbox to get you started. And if you do, make sure to keep your eye out for some guy playing as Kranzle King. So first up on the light mods list then was this anodised red nose ring, which I thought would match up with the metallic red bits on the Nismo's front bumper. So once the plastic cover had been unclipped from the grille, it was simply a case of screwing it into the factory mounting point behind, then securing the eye at the right angle of dangle. Now, while it likely won't serve any practical purpose, as I don't intend to need towing out of a ditch or gravel trap anytime soon, think for the sake of a couple of quid and a few minutes it's a nice little touch. Next up was a set of appropriately showy show plates made from a layer of transparent 4D ruby red, topped with a glittery grey 3D starlight gel, which despite being a bit tacky, thought might work well with the car's surrounding metallic grey and red accents. To make way for the new glittery bad boys, the existing plates obviously had to come off, which meant a bit of a tug of war to break the bond between the double-sided tape holding them in place. Once I got a fingertip or two under a corner of the front one, that came off without too much fuss, but because the rear one was stuck directly to the bumper, knew it had put up more of a fight, so after running a bit of blue tape along two of its edges to act as a refitment guide, used my nan's hairdryer to apply a bit of heat to soften up the adhesive and make it more pliable. And while this can be a bit of a faff, tape really is the only way to go in my opinion, as nobody detail oriented wants rusty screws protruding from the front and back of their car. Once the plates had been pulled, the remaining residue from the cheap double-sided tape, of which there was unfortunately a fair bit, was sprayed down with a citrus-based tar and glue remover and left to soak for a fair few minutes off camera, before being tediously removed with the flat edge of a trim removal tool wrapped in a general purpose towel. Again, the front was quicker to deal with than the back, but with a bit of persistence and some therapeutic effing and blinding under my breath, got there in the end. After the freshly degunked areas had been wiped over with an all-purpose cleaner to ensure a decent bond between plate and car, and some new future mess-making sticky pads had been applied to the frame for the front and the plate itself for the back, the new showbiz numbers were then carefully positioned into pride of place. Now, out of the sunshine, they don't look too in your face and at a glance could probably pass for a standard plate, but once the rays hit them at the right angle, you can definitely tell they ain't standard. A few days after the plates had been fitted, a box of 20mm spacers arrived in the post, as despite the factory raise wheels being pretty wide, with the exterior Nismo cosmetics, the standard fit just looks far too tucked. So I sorted the first two off camera to save some time and because I was waiting for a new trolley jack to arrive, but once it had, got to work testing it out after the nuts had been cracked to raise the car and remove the rims one at a time. But before getting to work fitting the spacers, I wanted to get a few things lightly spruced up first. So the steel nuts were then threaded back onto the lug so that they could be given a quick finger fettle with a metal polish to brighten them up and help keep the inevitable rust at bay. And tending to them like this gives you a bit more purchase than simply doing them in your hand, so it's worth considering when you next have your wheels off. There was a few stubborn bits of road spray on the front arch liners that I hadn't been able to properly access with the wheels on, so thought it made sense to give them a quick once over here while they were out the way. So an all-purpose cleaner was first applied to all areas of the liner with a small pressure sprayer before being left to soak for a minute or two to soften up the dirt. It was then thoroughly worked in with a shampoo primed long reach brush, which is perfect for agitating awkward areas like these. And once I felt I'd administered enough of a basic clean, as this wasn't intended to be a full-on arch detail or anything, rinsed off the suds and general purpose cleaner residue with the pressure washer. It was then spritzed over with a water-based dressing and left to drip dry, which generally leaves a nice uniform finish on parts like these without you having to actually work any product over the surface. Once the liners had been soaked in a water-based dressing, I applied a bit more of a durable tire dressing to the centre of the disc to add some superficial depth to the satin black finish, which would more closely match the fresh finish of the new spacers. And while obviously there's far more appropriate products and techniques for this, so long as you buff off any excess so it doesn't contaminate the disc itself, can provide a quick fix for brightening up generally neglected and unfinished areas like these. With the superficial arch and components spruce up out the way then, I spread a bit of copper grease around my rusty ring as well as over the backside of the spacers themselves, as if they decide to seize once fitted, you don't really have any leverage like you do with a wheel to work them loose, so it's worth applying a light layer to prevent any future hassle. The hub-centric spacer was then finally pressed into place, and while the back ones could be nipped with the Gyeon, rear-wheel drive problems meant that without someone to apply the brake, properly tightening the freely spinning front ones is a bit tricky, but a microfibre towel-wrapped screwy shoved down one of the vents in the disc and locked against the caliper soon sorted that dilemma. Once another bit of grease had been applied around the outer ring of the spacer itself, then the wheels were replaced, those nuts tightened and properly torqued, and after a quick spin around the block to settle the suspension, the freshly spaced situation was assessed. So certainly less tucked and more substantial looking from most angles, but the car does ideally still need dropping an inch or so to get the best out of them, so that's something I'll have to look into. Lastly then, it was time for the most serious and important part of the makeover in the form of a cheapo Amazon LED underglow kit for that nostalgic Fast and Furious feel. Obviously I'd only be rocking red to time with the other bits, and while I did plan to get a proper million LED Bluetooth control kit professionally installed, was working to a deadline with this video and couldn't afford to wait, so had to go with these cheap sticky strips instead. Now I didn't film any of the installation as it was a bit of a ball ache doing it on my back by myself, but I did grab a few phone clips afterwards to give you an idea of how things went. Now I wasn't going to hardwire a NAF kit like this, so went the Siggy lighter route instead, running the cables from that under the centre console where they then dropped beneath the rubber gear gaiter to the underside of the car. They were then connected up, routed and secured as neatly and safely as realistically as possible with zip ties, while the flexible LED bars themselves, which weren't really long enough but would hopefully still do the job for the sake of the video, were simply stuck to the plastic inner sills, underside of the boot floor and directly into a groove in the front under tray once these areas had of course been thoroughly degreased. After the interior had been tidied up then, aside from an inch or so of cable running from underneath the armrest lid to the handbrake handle where Nissan had conveniently placed a little notch, you'd be none the wiser of the dodgy install. So they'll likely be switched off most of the time, and when switched on will stay red to give that Nismo glow, but I just thought it would be a bit of a laugh to have the option of flashing passers-by when I see fit. And on that tasteful note, I think I'll leave it there for this video. So aside from the spacers, the other bits done here were all arguably pretty pointless from a practical perspective, but despite that I think they all tie in, and sometimes it's the odd little inexpensive bits that allow you to see your car in a new light. So cheers for tuning in. Try not to take the aesthetic additions too seriously as it's only a bit of light-hearted, easily reversible fun, but whether you do or you don't, I'll see you with a neonless dose of dedicated car cleaning action next time.